All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the session on student self-assessment. My name is Christy Reese. I'm DMS faculty and also chair of the assessment committee. So I wanted to take some time today just to go over some key details about student self-assessment, ways that I personally use it in the classroom, and hopefully have some conversations related to ways that you can use it in the classroom. So it's definitely meant to be very conversational, not overloaded with a ton of statistics and research and things like that, but more so just kind of best practices, what's involved in student self-assessment, and ways that I use it in health careers. And Nancy, I see that you're here, so some of these ways may be familiar or some may be new to you, so hopefully you'll gather something from them. But when we look at student self-assessment and self-assessment in general, really the benefits of doing this in the classroom is to improve student performance and build a reflective learner. So those are two key areas that really shine when it comes to using self-assessment as a tool to improve performance. And I'll talk about a few key different parts that go into the big picture of creating self-assessment assignments, when we can use it, what are ways that we can leverage it to really get buy-in from the students. And for me, again, a lot of mine is going to be framed a little bit more around the healthcare professional lens, because that's most of my applications when I do it in the classroom. So self-evaluation, when we look at it, it really follows the same assessment cycle as everything else. There's a component of reflection and really examining what we are saying we're going to get done, evaluating the process by which it's done, looking at our goals and what we characterize as achieving those goals, and then evaluating the data that we get from it or evaluating the big picture, and then doing some form of action upon that. So that's really essentially the assessment cycle in general, but it very equally relates to our self-assessment and self-evaluation process. So what happens when we do these in the classroom is it requires the student to really reflect on what is expected of them, what is a picture of it being done well, how can they prove that they can do it well or that they've learned it, and gives them the opportunity to take ownership in their strengths and weaknesses and then act upon those results. So really these are kind of the key steps of self-evaluation as a tool in the classroom. And a few things just to note on there that are important, although all steps are important, is there has to be that opportunity to understand what is the expectation. There has to be that representative of what does meeting that expectation look like when I'm doing it well, which is often associated with a rubric or a set standard, and evaluation of that, and then the ability to act on the results that they find. So it is a little bit challenging when we do a course to really use a self-evaluation assessment as a tool in the classroom if we just slap it at the end of the course. So that's something important that I want to point out, because I will talk a little bit about ways you can do that as well. So key elements of student self-assessment include all of these things. So it should be done as a formative process. So a process for learning, not to evaluate learning at the end, right? Not a summative process, because then there could be no change and no action and no building. Now, the caveat to that is a health career program like I do clinically, where you do it at the end of the clinical so that they can demonstrate growth and movement and progression in the next clinical rotation. Or if you have a course that builds on a course, then it could be used in that way for learning and for evaluation, so that when they get to that next bridge course, they can continue to work on those skills. But for student self-assessment to be successful, you really have to have the student buy-in. So they have to understand the importance, the relevance, and the value of that self-assessment when they do it. And a lot of things, just like, I know Gretchen's here, which makes me laugh every time. Clear expectations are crucial. So just like every other thing that we do, when we do a discussion board, when we do an assignment, as long as the student clearly understands what is expected of their self-assessment, then that starts to build the buy-in and the understanding of what is expected as they move forward and what's expected out of them. So before a student can really do a self-assessment of their own learning, they need that clear expectation and a demonstrated standard. For us, again, I'll just kind of use our ultrasound as an example. So for us, we give the standard of this is what an imaging protocol should look like. And this is what is ideal. And these are areas that you will be graded upon. And this is how your imaging should look. And that's our standard. And what is important is you don't just demonstrate that standard once and say, do it, right? That there would be no reflection or assessment there. You need to give time to practice and then time for improvement. So this is a building process and really building it into your course and helping the students to see the relevance and importance of it. For me, I do grade my students' self-assessments. I make them small point values. So I'm not going to grade you on how well you did, but overall, here is 10 points, for example, for you to complete this assessment, or 25 points depending on how large it is, and if it's small assessments along the way, they build to a bigger puzzle. Gretchen?
Yeah, and I was going to say the same thing, Christy, to Angela, is when I do self-assessments as well, I do it just like you do it, Christy, is I give them 10 points for completion. And so they're under that understanding that it has to be completed and so forth.
Yes. And there's a couple different ways. So I'm going to talk about them, just different techniques I've used in the classroom, because I've realized that in my own even development of this, I use more self-assessments than I realized, and I use them differently depending on the course and the level. So when is self-assessment beneficial? Really, always, right? Throughout the process, from start to finish, as a continuous form of improvement. So really showing our students that being reflective and being engaged in their own education is something that we drive all the time. And self-reflective activities such as self-assessments, and also these can even be a part of a journal reflection, right? Those reflective processes are shown across literature to really drive home those critical thinking skills, to engross them in the material, to get the deeper and richer meaning with the learning. So that is the short, abbreviated kind of overview of our self-assessment as an evaluation. I call it a bookend style, and I'm not sure if this is a true term, but this is the easiest way for me to connect it. When you look at self-assessment, you can really do self-evaluation assessment at the beginning of the course and the end of the course as well. And this gives the student an opportunity to look at the learning objectives in their course, to be able to evaluate their entry knowledge of the material itself. So this is especially useful when you are doing programs that are buildings, so there's like a 100 level course and then a 200 level course. Usually when you get to the 200 level course, students will come with a base knowledge to a degree, right? And you can have them rate, I have minimal, average, above average understanding of this area, this area, this area. So it can be done in a rubric style that they can look at and rate their knowledge at entry. So a student reflection based on how much they already know about the material and concepts that are going to be taught. And then at the end, how I do it is I put a list of the objectives. I have a first column that says beginning, and they rate themselves in the beginning. And then I have an end of the course column that at the end of the course, they can reflect on what they've learned. And the hope is that they've moved either up a level or two of mastery. So for me, this just helps me, again, to kind of gauge my audience a little bit. Mine is very specific, but again, if you have a group of students that already have a really good understanding of a certain topical area, you can maybe go a little bit further or dial down a little bit based on some of those self-assessments. All right, so another sample kind of self-assessment that I use is image evaluation. So for our students, they scan protocols in our lab, and the students are given objectives, they're given examples, and they're given set criteria throughout the course to image with. And at midterm, what I do is I give them a rubric to evaluate what they've done. So they'll perform an exam, I give them a rubric, and I say, go ahead and do a self-assessment. So do a self-evaluation of your imaging. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Rate it on the same criteria that I am. So I want it scored. I also score them on the same one. And then they're given feedback based on the comparison between the two rubric scores, and then also specific areas to work on. So that gives them that time for that improvement and that reevaluation that happens at the end of the course. So it's a way for them to, I always tell them, it's a way for you to connect with how you're being graded and connect with that rubric and make sure that we're assessing, right? We're both evaluating the same thing. So it definitely helps with the understanding and the engagement when it comes to using these in a lab setting. And connecting the students with their rubrics themselves. Any comments or questions? I would be interested to hear for sure from Nancy if she has done similar, or if kind of your experience in.
I do. We do self-assessments at the beginning, midterm, and then final assessments. And we don't grade them, we just grade them for completion as well.
See, and it definitely, it helps the student to really understand the expectations and to build. And for me, I have found definitely that students really appreciate it. Now, we also use ours for clinical performance. So at the end of the first rotation, second rotation, and final rotation, we have students do a self-evaluation of how they did clinically. So they rate themselves based on given criteria in multiple areas. So their quality of work, their patient care skills, their care of equipment, organization, and instrumentation. So, and there's a few more on this list. This is just kind of an umbrella. So what they do is they evaluate themselves, and also our clinical sites evaluate the students on the same criteria. And I always tell them that we should be about even when we see their results and the clinical results, because that means that we're in alignment with our expectations and what really demonstrates quality clinical performance when they're in the clinical setting. So for that, that's another self-assessment tool that we use that helps. And when you look at this, you might think, oh, final rotation, that's really the end, but it's not the end, because for us, that's them just evaluating themselves before they go out and to continue into the field itself. So that's really, all of these different rotations are where we have them do self-assessment. All right, so other ideas for self-assessment. Again, it doesn't just happen in areas such as clinical and health fields, like I said. Gretchen, you said you use yours as well, but it can be really beneficial when you have large projects, presentations, high stakes assignments, right? Essays, research papers, so that students can, along the way, have those check-ins to really reflect, am I staying on track? Am I producing the quality that I want to produce? Where am I at? And where do I want to be? So it gives that opportunity, again, for that reflection on the work that is being developed and what really is quality and what they hope to achieve. So those are some key ways that self-assessment can be used in practice. Now, I wanted to give a little bit of time. I definitely went through that faster than I thought I would, but I wanted to give some time just to have discussion related to what type of a self-assessment techniques you're using in the classroom, what you found to be helpful, what you've found to be a failure, right? It's good to have these conversations so we can talk through just the different areas across campus and the way that they use self-assessment in the classroom. Any volunteers?
Well, I'm just trying to think of an idea. I'm not 100% sure what the like a large assignment would consist of. I'm not really sure, to be honest.
So I will say that, and maybe I'll give opportunity for someone else before I jump in with a way that I've included in the large assignment. Angela?
Hi. So I used to use this when I taught at the high school, and I did it more at the end of a unit where they're kind of assessing their metacognition skills, you know, and I tied it more to curriculum, or even sometimes I would do it before a test, you know, to figure out, you know, where the areas they needed to, you know, study more for. But as you're talking, I was like, I could do this for lesson planning in my education class. So at the start of the semester, I could break down like the key elements of their lesson plan, and then, you know, have them practice lesson planning throughout the semester. And then like that last final, you know, project is implementing the lesson plan in front of the class. And again, they would assess themselves there. So I love that. Your idea.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, and I would say too, one thing that just kind of came to mind overall that, is something that I did that was a self-assessment, but also less opportunity, more of just a general assessment as well. So not just self, but also a little bit of critique for instructor. But I did a self-assessment in my course that just said, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What can you do to improve on your weaknesses, and what can I do to help you? And that was more of one of our temperature checks, is what we referred to them during Learning Improvement Week as. But really, that was a self-assessment for my students, because it allowed them to evaluate, you know, big picture, I'm strong here, I'm weak here, and how can I make it better? Let me look and reflect, give a solid reason and way that I can. And then, of course, I personally addressed the ways that I could help them be successful in meeting their goals or achieving that outcome. So that was, again, just one of those it was just completion based. Self-assessment tools can be 10 points or 5 points even, just to really get them engaged. But they have to see the importance and the significance of it to really get that buy-in if you want to use it as a continuous process. Gretchen?
Yeah, so back to my journals. So I use my journals for the self-assessment, where it's basically the question of, you know, what is a takeaway from, you know, this chapter or this, and it's my online classes, you know, what are takeaways that you learned from this week, and what are some things that you would still like to learn moving forward, so that they can take some time to really reflect, exactly what you're saying, Christy, but really to reflect on what did they take away from that week, you know, and for me as an instructor, I'm also then assessing, are they actually doing the assignments? Are they actually taking away what I as an instructor want them to be learning as well? So that's what I do.
Right. And Gretchen has turned me on to journals. We've had this conversation on a lot of platforms, but definitely those are all different practices that have been proven. Again, reflective practice in learning, whether it's at the community college level, bachelor's level, master's level, PhD, all of them have some form of reflective education that has proven to be effective and really enrich learning. So those are a few different ways. Anybody else want to add something that they've used in the classroom, or an area that maybe they want to throw out an idea or an area that maybe we could throw out ideas to help you come up with some form of student self-assessment that may work?
It's Gretchen again. I also, like Angela, do the pre-tests in my face-to-face classes. I think that those are also really good self-assessments for them. And I always try to take like, it's only like 4 questions, but I also make sure that I then put them in the exam at the end, so that they, you know, that at least they're looking for, and it's like the big picture stuff that we're looking at. So I do that as well, to get the students prepared for when we're going to start talking about a chapter in class as well. So those are the ones I do.
Good. And I would say too, as you build self-assessments, they don't have to be big, massive things, right? They can just be small components. It could be built in as a survey even in your Blackboard shell, right? We do those midterm surveys of instructors, but they could do a midterm self-evaluation survey just to give you the feedback that they feel on themselves. Kevin?
Yeah, exactly why I put my hand up. I was going to say, we can do all these different types of assessment, pen and paper, but I've used Google Forms to do assessment as well. And like you just said, I was nodding my head because it was like 2 questions, 1 question, but it can be really easy. It doesn't have to be long or complicated. That's great too. But I've used Google Forms just because it's been a great way to easily compile the findings from semester to semester, and I can quickly compare this project across years actually, and it's so interesting to see the comments that students make and how sometimes for whatever reason it seems to be great and it works well, the particular assignment. Students reflect on it and say that was great, and then other semesters you get different types of feedback that would indicate otherwise. So I've been able to use their self-assessments to then refine and tweak my assignments.
Yeah, and I would say for sure, Google Forms, I'm a huge fan of, especially lately. Between Google Forms and really SurveyMonkey, I spent $1 million on my own yearly subscription. So I will do 1 million SurveyMonkeys just for that reason. But they offer a great opportunity to make quick and sometimes even fun self-assessments, dare I say, that are visually pleasing and engaging. But they give a lot of really good information. And even with the self-assessments, when you do ask about areas of weakness, and just to your point, Kevin, you can see then as you're evaluating, if multiple students are saying, hey, this is an area of weakness for me, maybe even it's something that you hadn't even considered as being an area that you could work on in your classroom to really enrich their learning, then it gives you that opportunity to touch up on that as well. So that's a great point. Any other comments or thoughts? Any other things that you use for self-assessment? Google Forms is great. SurveyMonkey, if you are crazy and buy subscriptions like me for no reason. But yeah, Blackboard has that survey tool that's built in there again for midterm survey evaluations and final evaluations. You can really create and develop whatever works for you. It doesn't have to be huge, long assignments or huge, long, word-heavy evaluations.
Christy, it's Gretchen. For those surveys too, what I do in my group projects is I actually create the survey evaluations for my students to do. So you can do them like tons of different things with them as well. They're good.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely some good ways to facilitate, if you will, those different self-assessments. All right. Well, I am actually out of the ideas that I had. I was hoping that I could help more or get some different ideas that I can give or could feed into a little bit. But that's really all I had for student self-assessment and using it in the classroom. Any other comments or thoughts? Nancy?
So, Yeah, so I have a multiple of things that we evaluate for clinical. So for example, like communication, professional appearance, things like that. Would you recommend maybe for student self-assessment breaking those down, or would you recommend just kind of having them do them all at the same time and then just kind of compare them to the end of the week, or how would you?
So normally when we do our list, they are done each semester, but we do, I'm trying to think, so what were your categories again?
So I have like attitude, communication, professional appearance, punctuality, and dependability. So those are some of the ones that.
I think those are the key ones that we have as well, because we do have work ethic in there as well, which goes with our professionalism. But yeah, we do ours on ethical behavior, patient care is a category for ours too. Just overarching patient care. Do you have them broken down into like 4 or 5 different options in your category?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have the same. It sounds like we have a very similar pattern.
I just wanted to make sure maybe I'm doing it in the right way perfect.
Yeah, that's how we have it, and we leave for ours for ourselves, both ourself and the ones that our clinical people fill out. Ours it's identical again, but we always leave room for comment too. Not that our students ever really fill out a bunch of comments about themselves, but the sites do use it. So I would say that there's definitely that.
Thank you.
Yeah, ours is all, do you have actual document, or do you use a platform for it? How do you guys do yours?
We don't have a platform. We do these just in a Word document. So the student sees it, the clinical instructor sees it, and I see it. What I've been doing now is I've been having the students fill out a self-assessment, and then I'm comparing it to what the clinical instructors give me. And yes, they don't really write additional comments, but they do fill out the different boxes. So
now we use Trajexis. I know we use that, but so for ours, all of their stuff is computerized in that system. So they check boxes and then they can type theirs in, and then I just pull reporting and can compare it on the same screen. So there is that benefit to that, but also a cost to the student. So less paperwork, but definitely similar process for sure.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Any other thoughts or comments? All right. Well, I only stole 30 minutes of your afternoon instead of 45. But if you come up with any questions or if you have any other thoughts, for sure, just let me know. I'm happy to talk all things assessment. Most of you know that already. But that's all I have for you this afternoon.
Thanks, Christy. That was great.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you.